Monsieur Poirot speaks. Oh,
Hey gang, Uncle Todd and Sunny here, and covering your eye up. And we are going classy tonight with our look at an Agatha Christy cozy mystery. Originally called whodunnits, they were called cozy mysteries these days because more or less murders take place off screen. Nobody's ever in really any physical danger on screen. I mean, people do get killed, but very bloodless. It's mostly conversations as the detective makes his way through the list of suspects. And kind of the kind of mystery you read when you're curled up next to a crackling fireplace with a little wine or coffee at your side, you know. Anyway, man, you were just having time with your tie. Mine, not so bad. Anyway, we're doing Poirot, and we're doing the one titled Halloween Party, which was also adapted into A Haunting in Venice by Kenneth Branagh. And well, if you saw my review of that, you know I was very disappointed in it. As good a filmmaker and actor as Branagh is, he really doesn't seem to grasp Agatha Christie is not full of chases and fights and shootings and things. It's about the mystery and clues and things like that, and misdirection. Very big on misdirection. This, of course, stars David Suchet, who has the distinction of having played Poirot in every, or I should say an adaptation of every book and short story that he appeared in Christie's writing, over almost a 25-year period from 1989 to 2013. And is considered by many, myself included, as the definitive adaptations of Agatha Christie's work. And David Suchet is the definitive Hercule Poirot. More so than any other actor. Albert Finney, Peter Ustinov, Kenneth Branagh, and some we really don't need to mention. This also has it was a later book in her series. Instead of Captain Hastings, we have Adrienne Oliver, who is a crime novelist or writer of whodunits, who is more or less a spoof of Christie herself that she created. A very amusing character with some hilarious bits that she did throughout the book series. And she, especially when they get into her famous Swedish detective that she seems to just hate having to write any more mysteries about, but the public demands it. But she's sick of the character and all the eccentricities she gave him. Might even mirror Christie herself, who herself did not care for Poirot as the years passed by, and much preferred Jane Marple, her creation in the, I think, late 30s to early 40s, who she patterned very much after herself in certain aspects. But As popular as Miss Marple was, she just never attained the heights that Poirot did. He was just one of a kind with his little graces. We open with Mrs. Oliver helping out on a children's Halloween party. And at one point, she gets into an interesting conversation with a little girl.
I saw a murder once.
Don't be silly, Joyce.
I did.
Oh, really? Of course you didn't see a murder. Don't say such foolish things, dear.
Has everyone had a go at the apples, Vicar?
I did see a murder. I did.
Well, of course, people are going to scoff. Imaginative child. But she insists and gets pressed for details.
It wasn't really till a long time afterwards, that I began to realise it was a murder I saw.
That's more a Christmassy thing, isn't it?
Well, we Drakes always played at Halloween.
Why didn't you go to the coppers then?
Because I didn't know at the time that it was a murder.
Well, Mrs. Drake's doing her best to get everybody off that subject, but then everyone does get their mind off that subject when a witch shows up.
It's Halloween for young and old. Now, who would like their fortune told?
That's the local gossip, Ms. Goodbody, who... Goodbody? Yeah, Goodbody. Who crashes the party, wanting to have fun with the kids, but they soon get her out the door so that the kids can play Snapdragon in, after they finish their bobbing for apples. And, well, the kids are enjoying Snapdragon. Mrs. Oliver apparently startles Mrs. Drake.
Oh dear, you're drenched.
What a clumsy thing you must think.
No, it can happen to us all.
Accidents will happen. After the party, the maid who is going to be cleaning up makes the horrifying discovery that the child who had talked about saving a murder earlier has been drowned in the apple bobbing bucket. Mrs. Oliver, now suspicious that maybe the child had seen a murder, quickly telephones her good friend, the famed detective Hercule Poirot, who himself has been lamenting that back in his day, he is old after all, they didn't go in for all this spooky stuff for Halloween. This was a day to remember past loved ones, you know. All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day, that kind of stuff. Although his butler George does kind of like a little spooky story on Halloween. Well, intrigued, Poirot grabs a train to head down to this village, where he makes the acquaintance of a man who's also returning to the area.
I see you've been out of England some little time, monsieur.
Fresh off the boat from Athens. Superb.
A stranger who has just gotten into the area from Athens. Obviously, he could not have been the one to commit the crime, which, in Agatha Christie's world, means, obviously, he's the #1 suspect. We also learn he is going to the same place as Poirot.
Woodley Common?
Me too. Oh, very nice. Yes, I live there, as a matter of fact.
Indeed. For how long, may I ask?
About 3 years. Yes. Came to do a garden, never left. So, it's what I do, gardens, creation thereof.
The man is Michael Garfield. Bit of a bohemian when you look at him. He finds out why Poirot is heading to the area and gets a little questioning on whether he knew the victim. He's not sure. He might have seen her around. A lot of kids like to come to the garden sometimes, but not well enough to actually place her. And then Poirot asks him for a little advice.
Got the local, how do you call it, the chitter-chatter, the local gossip. To whom should I go?
Monsieur? Tell me, do you believe in witches?
Okay. Witchcraft. Poirot arrives and he goes to the house of Mrs. Butler, meets her and her daughter Miranda. Mrs. Oliver is laid up with a cold from the damp, rainy night of the Halloween party. And she goes over with Poirot all the things that happened that night that she can remember. And Poirot is very intrigued by the comment that she witnessed a murder but didn't realize it was a murder. That is the thing that ticks in his brain. Next he goes to the police, who are not exactly thrilled to see him.
There have been murders not solved in this area?
Look, I don't mean to be rude, sir. I mean, I've heard of you, of course. Who hasn't? But we have very modern methods of policing nowadays. I know you're very hot on your theorising, your psychological whatnots, but I think this is better left to us.
I'm sure he's not going to regret those remarks. Why is it does everybody not take him seriously, considering his track record? After a brief visit to the garden, where he notices Miranda likes to hang out, he heads over to Drake's, where he also meets the Reynolds, who are mother and brother of the unfortunate victim. And he very delicately questions her. And him being stuck on this previous murder kind of irks everyone. After all, it was some tramp, wasn't it? And Miranda's always telling these kind of things.
Sure you're going about this the right way, monsieur? Shouldn't you be looking for Joyce's killer in the here and now?
Old sins cast long shadows, Mother.
I wonder if that cryptic comment might have some bearing on some of the solutions to this case. That, of course, is Mrs. Butler, not Mrs. Reynolds or Mrs. Drake. Anyways, after that, he then pays a visit by himself to the local gossip, Ms. Goodbody, and learns of 3 solved murders in the past few years that would fit Joyce's story.
Beatrice White.
C'est the mademoiselle?
Monsieur Leslie Ferrier.
Ferrier? Bon.
And Mrs. Llewellyn Smythe.
We then learn from the gossip that Miss Llewellyn Smythe was Mrs. Drake's aunt, and she had a servant that was taking care of her, a foreign girl named Olga that had been brought over by the local reverend. And after she died, there was some suspicion that the death wasn't on the up and up. But Poirot's not too sure about that one. After all, how would Joyce have known this? Mr. Ferrier was a solicitor's assistant, and he boarded at Mrs. Reynolds' house, so Joyce would have known him. And he was also known to go out with Mrs. Drake's daughter. And he was unfortunately attacked one night. Police believed it was a random mugging assault that went too far, and he got stabbed. We then come to Mrs. White, who was a school teacher, taught Joyce, and she was known to be a bit chummy, maybe a little too chummy, with the church organist. And she was found drowned. Suspected suicide or accidental. More likely accidental because She had been drinking. And so Poirot thanks her, and next visits the solicitor, who was the boss of Mr. Farrar, where he learns that they handled the estate of Mrs. Smythe, and that she had made a codicil wiping out Mrs. Drake and her family from getting the estate and giving it instead to her au pair Olga, although it was quickly found to be a rather amateurish forgery. After which she disappeared. So we then where did I leave off here? We then return to Mrs. Oliver, who is having a heck of a time with her novel.
You should not work, you should rest.
I have deadlines, Poirot, in sickness and in health. And my child of an editor is pressing me for another draft of I'll Huff and I'll Puff.
Comment?
Sven Herson solves a murder in a hot air balloon over Abyssinia.
Nice little comic interlude there. Poirot next attends the funeral of Joyce, where he observes an interesting interaction between Mrs. Butler and Mrs. Drake's gardener.
I was wondering if we could go and take some tea sometime soon, the three of us.
Yes. No, I'm afraid not. Why not? You've been poorly, my darling, that's why.
It's not made of glass, you know.
Interesting. Oh, I should make mention that earlier it was learned that Miranda's father was a pilot in the war, and he didn't make it back. In fact, he didn't even get to see her birth. Oh, and Poirot has a pretty nice little conversation with Joyce's brother.
Leopold, is it not? Oh, c'est très joli. That is a present, perhaps, huh?
Pocket money. I saved up.
Most perspicacious.
He must have saved up an awful lot of pocket money. Make a note of that. After talking with the minister, or the vicar, as they would call them in England, he learns that Joyce actually is not Mrs. Reynolds' actual daughter. It's her stepdaughter. Husband's died too. Anyways, he then talks to the church organist about her friendship with Miss White, and she says something very interesting.
Beatrice was the finest person I've ever met. I cared for her very deeply, monsieur. And I only discovered how much she cared when it was too late.
I'm pretty sure we all know the implication of that, but it does make one wonder. Did she kill her would-be amour? Is this the crime that Joyce saw? Hard to say. Moving on. Poirot goes to visit the Drakes, where he runs into Mr. Garfield and the garden, of course, where he learns from him that Olga, she liked to play around with a lot of the guys in the village. If you know what I mean.
Sex.
Oh, no. This is a genteel mystery. We don't have anything like so obvious as that. We like to use euphemisms. Anyways, during the conversation at the lunch at the Drakes, Poirot gets some more history of the family.
You have lived here a long time?
10 years or so. My late husband and I came here to be with my aunt. We were the only family she had.
Yes. Madame Llewellyn Smythe.
That's right.
And then poor Daddy died.
Run down by a motor car.
After lunch, Poirot witnesses another interesting altercation with Mr. Garfield.
Get away from this house. You are not welcome here.
I beg your pardon?
I've made it perfectly clear to you, Mr. Garfield, on numerous occasions, that I do not approve of you hanging around in this fashion.
Oh, I'm afraid I can't help it. It's such a lovely view.
My gosh, he's a scoundrel. Hitting on Miss Butler, hitting on her daughter, hitting on Mrs. Drake's daughter. He probably hit on Olga too, despite his saying she's not my type. Mrs. Oliver has a nightmare, and then remembers something she forgot, and quickly has Poirot come to hear it.
But here's the thing. She was looking towards the library, you understand? Where Joyce was found not long after. Maybe she saw someone she didn't expect to see.
And did you yourself see there anyone?
No.
Who could she have seen? And it would have had to have been someone she did not expect, because Mrs. Drake isn't the type to startle easily. Poirot uses his connections with Scotland Yard to get the local guy to allow him to see the forged will that they have in evidence. And detective's not too happy about it, but you gonna argue with Scotland Yard? And some ministers? He also lets Poirot look at Ferrier's possessions, and he finds something intriguing that he immediately takes to the solicitor.
Yes, that's the codicil, all right, the forgery.
No, monsieur. You are mistaken.
I can assure you.
No, monsieur. This is the codicil that was given to me by the Inspector Raglan, and it was this document that was examined by the experts and declared to be the fake.
Poirot found that document hidden in a picture frame among Ferrier's effects. Also, doing a background check, he found that he had spent about 3 months in jail for forgery. Obviously, Olga had gotten Ferrier to make a forgery for the codicil. But then when the solicitor looks both documents over, he finds another interesting thing that nobody had noticed yet.
Now, this is odd.
Pourquoi?
I'm no expert, but it seems to me that Ferrier has made a far better job on this one than the one he sent to me.
Interesting. What could that possibly mean? Well, fortunately, we're about to receive some bad news, as the church organist, going to where her friend died, makes a rather grisly discovery.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Poor Leopold. He's not going to be able to enjoy that watch anymore. Now, why do you suppose he ended up in the pond like that? Poirot does talk to the organist, and he's able to eliminate Ms. White as the murder that Joyce said she saw.
Beatrice could never reconcile herself to her true nature. Could never love me the way. I didn't tell the police about the note. I wanted to save her from the final indignity. An unconsecrated grave.
Well, Poirot offers her his sympathy. He may be a devout Catholic, but he can sympathize with someone's loss. No sin in his eyes. Anyway, he next visits the vicar, where he learns that some days before her passing, Mrs. Smythe had come to see him, and she had been complaining about a betrayal. A betrayal that she could not overlook. Well, she wouldn't tell him what it is, but obviously it must have been about Olga. She must have found out, and Olga made her death look like natural causes or something. Then finally Poirot goes to see Mrs. Drake to confront her about what she saw in the library.
That night, in the hallway, the library door opened rather carefully, and I saw him.
Whom did you see, madame?
Leopold.
Well, looks like Poirot has all his answers.
This just about solves the mystery. What?
A little premature. Poirot's still figuring some things out.
She appropriated the story. A murder that was witnessed by someone else. Someone with whom she shared her secrets.
Miranda.
Miranda witnessed something and told Joyce. Why didn't she go to police? Oh, Miranda's not in the house. Where could she be?
It's so beautiful. It's bright as day.
A little eerie. Wonder who's under that mask. Well, I think we all know who's under that mask.
This just about solves the mystery. What?
Yet. Jeez. Quit jumping the gun. And what does our nefarious gardener plan for Miranda?
I have to die so that others might live, so that beauty can live.
That's right.
What I saw, was that a sacrifice too?
In a way.
A sacrifice? Ooh, it's getting bad. Think I'll use a dagger?
What does it taste of?
It'll taste of whatever you want it to. It's magical, you see. It's quite magical. You remember what I said, Miranda, about returning to nature?
Oh no, he's gonna Jim Jones her. We need some help now.
Drink to beauty, Miranda.
This just about solves the mystery. What?
Seriously? We haven't even hit Poirot's explanation yet. Oh, would you like a little bit of action he did? A little out of character from the books, but I'll allow it since it's a Halloween thing. You need a little spookiness. Well, it's time to find out what exactly it was Miranda saw.
I'd been by myself, reading in the garden when I spotted Michael. I was going to wave and then I noticed he was dragging something. It was a body.
This just about solves.
No. Here's the thing. Miranda didn't tell Joyce it was Michael. And it took them some time for Michael to figure out that Joyce wasn't the one who saw it. It'd been Miranda. But there's one problem. Wasn't he in Greece at the time of Joyce's murder? Was there some kind of trick involved? Hard to say. But, I mean, this does wrap things up. Michael's been arrested. And, everybody's getting ready to go. When Poirot springs a little surprise.
It is time for Poirot to tell to you a story. A Halloween story.
Okay, this is going to get a little complicated, you know, because the way those denouements run, it's way too long for me to show. So it breaks down to this, in the order of events. Mrs. Drake was having an affair with Mr. Galbraith, aka Michael. And Michael is the one who killed her husband by running him down. Now, their aunt, Mrs. Smythe, found out about this and wasn't sure what to do about it. No proof. So she had a codicil made, giving everything to her au pair Olga, who was devoted to her. Michael Ferrer knew about this. He was a forger. He liked money. He went to Mrs. Drake. He created a new codicil that was forged. When he went to get payment, they killed him, made it look like a mugging. Then, after the forgery was discovered, they killed Olga, and Michael buried her in the garden. That's what Miranda saw, what she told Joyce. When Mrs. Drake heard Joyce say she had a murder, things clicked in her head, and she drowned Joyce in the bucket. She was seen by Leopold, who started blackmailing them, so they had to get rid of him. Is at this point they realized Joyce wasn't the one who saw it, it was Miranda, so they were going to have to get rid of her. Now, it's a pretty good theory. How to prove it? Perhaps the gardener can help.
There had been someone else in his life. Another lover. Had there not, Madam Butler?
In there.
I never told him about Miranda.
Do you not think I guessed, Judith? Hmm? My beautiful child.
Oh. So he's Miranda's father. He was going to kill his own daughter? He's worse than I thought. Wonder how Mrs. Drake's taking that.
No, no, no. No, no, no! It's you! I should have drowned you! Filthy little beast! It should have been you!
Now we have a confession. Oh, well, there's one more thing we need to clarify about our nefarious gigolo.
One must have money. Get pretty things. I was very fond of you, Judith. Once. But even you're losing your looks now. Hmm?
Boy, you gotta take him for a ride. He's a cad. The very epitome of a cad. Like George Sanders, whose autobiography was titled Confessions of a Professional Cad. Anyways, they're taken away. The next day, the body of poor Olga is dug up, and Poirot gives us one of those Columbo explanations of what triggered his realization of Mrs. Drake.
As soon as Madame Oliver told to me of the dropping of the vase, my suspicions, they were aroused. Because I knew that the killer of Joyce Reynolds would have been soaking wet.
While we're on that subject of suspicions, how did Poirot figure out that the pilot husband was a fictitious?
This husband, this pilot, this Max, so beloved, And yet there was not one single photograph of him on your mantel shelf.
Basically, Mrs. Baxter. Yeah, I keep forgetting his name. There's so many people in here. Butler. Mrs. Butler wanted Miranda to have a father she could be proud of. Dependable. Loving. Kind. Everything her real father wasn't. Well, with that, Mrs. Oliver, Mrs. Butler then proceed into the mausoleum, I think, or the cemetery, I should say, to light candles for the souls of those they've lost. Joyce, Leopold, Mrs. White. Yeah, really good mystery. Typical Agatha Christy misdirection. I love David Suchet in this role. He is so perfect. One of the more interesting things I like is that when he developed Poirot's limp, which he has from the beginning, war injury from the Great War, before he became a Belgian refugee in England, he would alternate, earlier in the day it would be a slight limp, usually in the evening it would be a little more pronounced. There's one scene where it's very, very pronounced, and they give a hilarious reason for it.
What's the matter?
It is my feet. They cause me the pain.
It's those silly patent leather shoes of yours. Ludicrous for the country.
Yes. Poirot's sense of style will not be compromised just because he's got the wrong footwear for traipsing through the countryside. Always like those little bits they give for his personality. That part is actually taken from the book itself. It was like a running gag throughout the book that his feet were constantly in pain because he was wearing shoes not appropriate. And he just could not bring himself to put on a pair of large boots. The man has standards, after all. It's a good mystery. And typical Agatha Christie. A lot of misdirection, but just enough clues that if you're familiar with the way her plots work, you can kind of figure out some of it. For me, there's always two ways to tell who the killer is in an Agatha Christie film or book. One, if someone makes an attempt on someone's life, they're actually the murderer. And eventually there will be another death, and that will be the real murder perpetrated by the supposed victim. And of course, on the other one, the one person that could not have possibly done it, no matter what, is the one who did it, bar none. This one went with number 2. And there's always an affair with two people you would not think would be together, and you can always tell this because they argue a lot and seem to hate each other. It's one of her main tropes. Of course, that doesn't work for Murder on the Orient Express because everybody did it in that one. But most of them, like Death on the Nile and The Third Girl and Mysterious Ferret Styles, those all follow the usual pattern. I especially like how this one, because of its Halloween theme, puts in quite a few eerie scenes, most during the beginning at the Halloween party, and then of course that suspenseful moment in the graveyard, but for the most part it is a standard style of Agatha Christie, where a lot of questioning, a lot of clues, a lot of things that contradict each other. And one of the things I liked, which it's been a long time since I read the book, so I'm not sure if the relationship between the church organist and the school teacher was as put forward as it is here. But I like that Poirot's not judging them. He doesn't condemn them for the love that dare not speak its name. Which, very progressive for him, considering his character was a devout Catholic. Actually, they added these kind of elements to a lot of Christie adaptations. There's one in Miss Marple where her niece and this other woman were in an obvious affair with each other. They lived together as roommates. But there was no judgment from Miss Marple. And that one, I believe, was not actually part of the book. It was very overt, where one character dressed very masculine. But getting back to this one, this was a really good mystery. I liked Mrs. Oliver. She always has some good humor about her character. Very obvious Christie was making fun of her. She had some like odd habits herself. Her constant eating of apples, and so there were always apple cores all over the place wherever she was. They would come spilling out of her car, or they'd be littered around the bathroom because she liked to soak in the tub and eat apples. It's just one of those little quirks that Christie gave her. And she was a good companion to Poirot in the later years. Not quite as dim as Hastings was, but not as sharp as Poirot, because few are. And of course they added some things to this because there wasn't always a lot of melodrama between characters, which they kind of fleshed out here. But you got a good set of suspects. You've got the flirty daughter of Mrs. Drake. You got the weirdly macabre-oriented son who liked reading Poe. And, you know, of course, all the snobbish detective who gets his comeuppance because Poirot's just that good. And I love Suchet. He's a very subtle actor in this part. And they give him a little action, which, but it's okay. It's not as the extreme as like in Kenneth Branagh, where he's running through a train being shot at. It's just enough of Poirot hitting someone with a cane because he's so worked up over the audacity of the man. Because Poirot's all about manners. Good manners. He reminds me of Nero Wolfe in a way. You know, there's just certain things you don't do, especially for guests. You know, guests are to be treated a certain way, and guests are to act a certain way. He's very manner-oriented. Might be a little slow-moving for people that want a real scare fest, but for a good Halloween cozy mystery, this is highly recommended, as are any of Suchet's Poirot episodes. They're all good. Please hit like, share, and subscribe. And as always, stay after for my favorite scene.